All right, well, we're going to get started. Welcome to ISFSI's Happy Hour for the month of May. I'm really excited to get to introduce everyone to David Rhodes, who has graciously decided to join us this month, and the timing is really perfect. But before we jump into that, just a friendly reminder to everyone to please keep your lines muted if you're not talking, and use the chat feature to ask any questions you might have. So I'm really not sure that much of an introduction needs to be made. I think everybody probably has, if you have not met David in person, you've certainly heard him on a podcast or a webinar or seen him at a recent event, perhaps FDIC or perhaps one of the other national events that he seems to be making his way around the nation to get to. But we appreciate you being here today. And really, the timing's great because FDIC wrapped up a couple of weeks ago. Fantastic event. There was so much that everybody took away from. A lot of the people that are on this call right now, I know were there. But one of the first things I want to, ask is, if you could share with the group here, knowing that the bulk share of these people are members, but they're also really heavily engaged and involved in the instruction in the fire service. And, can you share a little bit about what your role has been in your career as an instructor? And how do you think that role is important, regardless of where you're practicing here in the United States or elsewhere?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. And it's good to see everybody at FDIC. It was a record setting 36,500 plus. So it was some crowded hallways, but it's good. It was a good vibe, good vibe. I was very fortunate. I started out in a small department, um, just east of Atlanta, Georgia. It was a little community called Conyers, and it's where I grew up. Just a one station department, and everybody at that station was a state instructor. They really encouraged you to train outside of your department. It was kind of an anomaly, really. If you requested to go to the state academy to train, they gave you the entire shift off. So it wasn't like you had to come back at night. Um, and if you had a week long class, then you just came back the next shift. You were regularly scheduled to work. But um, so I hung around instructors from day one, and they got me involved in helping them teach classes, whether it was basic firefighter or live structural burn classes. I think I hit every county in the state on weekends doing acquired structural burns. And then probably about three years into my career, I had already taken all the instructor classes. Didn't mean I was great at it, but I had done all the formal training for everything from basic firefighter instructor all the way to like rope rescue, technical rescue. And then I just hung around and was like the assistant instructor for a lot of things. And after about 6 or 7 years, worked my way up to lead instructor on a few of those classes. And so it's been part of my fire department culture since day one. And what I learned from it was, um, you learn more from teaching uh, than you do from just attending a class. You teach the same class over and over and over, but you see people do things different ways. And so you learn what works and what doesn't work, and then you start incorporating those into the class. So it's a really great way to stay on top of your game, is to be an instructor. And I never did like that saying that those who those who do and those who can't teach. I've heard that for a long time, and I found that the instructor cadre around the fire service is the cream of the crop, for the most part, and they are the ones that are staying on top of the standards, and they're staying on top of technology changes. And I tell you, a perfect example was, from the time I was 19 years old to the time I went to my first UL panel, which was, I don't know, probably 15 years ago, 12 to 15 years ago. I had taught so many acquired structural burn classes and learned how to get the most out of an acquired structure, for a 3-day burn or whatever with 50, 60 students. When they started talking flow path and all these terms we had never heard before, I knew exactly what they were talking about. I just didn't call it the same thing. But I had learned that through me being a acquired structural fire instructor, 1403 compliant and all that stuff. So it was good to see the research. It was like aha moments. I didn't really think about it in the time I was teaching necessarily. I just knew not to stand in between the door and the fire. I'd hide behind the wall. And then all the students would be like, man, how'd you stay in there so long? It was like, well, it was fine where I was. I was ducked around the corner. I wasn't where you guys were. And so it kind of, the light bulbs went on when I started learning more about the actual science of it. But it made sense, the ventilation stuff, everything. So I think the more engaged you are with being an instructor, it just makes you a better firefighter, when you're on duty, no matter what your assignment is, whether it's tech rescue or EMS or firefighting.
Right, absolutely. We always say like we don't we're an instructor organization, but we don't discriminate with who the instructor is,
Right.
because like that one of the most important fire instructors is the company officer who's sitting at the kitchen table doing tabletop exercises, or who's sharing a learning experience at the end of the day, or whatever the case that may be. It's not necessarily just textbook learning, but it's also conversations. And something you mentioned about how small your department was, and what a strong cultural sense that they had regarding the importance of training. How do you think that they created that? Like, the bulk share of our members are from smaller to mid-sized departments that may have very limited training budgets, but how do you create that culture of that training is critically important?
Yeah, I think the our leadership in the department, even though they may not have been the most progressive, up to date with everything themselves, they just had that personality of saying yes. And so they saw the benefit of the officers being instructors, and how it, we were running 2 units, a 2-person little, let's call it a mid-duty rescue. It had rope rescue, hearse tools, extrication stuff, some limited shoring, but it was just a 2-person unit, and then we had an engine, and so we had 3 people. Some days there'd be 2 on the rescue and 1 on the engine, but we all went together to anything. And on the good days, we'd have 3 on the engine and 2 on the rescue. But they weren't afraid. I guess coverage wise, they weren't afraid to hire overtime for somebody to cover, for somebody to go to school. Um, and they saw I guess, the sort of the intangible value that having all of their members so involved in the state training and in other organizations, that it brought back 100-fold what it cost them in overtime. And I will say again, it was an anomaly because I was hired in 1985, and at that time they were working 24/72, and you earned your sick leave and your vacation in 24-hour increments, because if the city employees who worked 8 hours a day had 10 holidays that were 8 hours, we had 10 24-hour holidays. Where like now you would have to take 3 days to get one in most organizations. So they had the connections, and they had convinced the city that, you know, we work a 24-hour shift, so that's one day. So we accrued our sick leave and vacation time and all that, and and it's a good lesson in, you can get pretty much whatever you need if you know how to sell it. And they had the relationships and made it work. we weren't paid that well. I think I mean, for 1985, I think I started out at $13,000 a year,
Wow.
2472, and then we went 2448, and I got a bump all the way up to 24,000 a year because they kept us sort of as hourly employees. Then we consolidated with the county department, and it was totally different culture there. You could not get off for anything unless you took your own time. I mean, there was a few things you could take off for, but for the most part, you had to take your own time. And then that, I wasn't going to stop. So that kind of, if you've heard me talk about the sacrifice and stuff, there was a lot of days where we'd go to fire schools and there'd be, 4 to a room. You'd be sleeping on the floor in a sleeping bag on thin carpet, and
Wow.
as instructors, you know, we
Yeah.
drive 300 miles just to be able to throw pallets, all weekend. It was fun.
Well, let's talk. You started out talking a little bit about FDIC, and I'd like to jump back to that because it really is kind of fresh. And for me, FDIC is one of those things where like I go to FDIC and I leave number one exhausted, but which I think everybody that's on this call that was there can attest to that. But you also leave with a sense of just excitement and what did you learn and what can you bring back, and that's whether you're a firefighter or an instructor or you're in a leadership role in an organization, there's something for everyone to take back, and to do better and be better at your profession. And so for me, the one standout moment that I had was in day 2 opening ceremony, and it was your speech about the mask. And a lot of you guys were there, and you saw it firsthand. It was an incredibly powerful
Yeah,
introduction
right
about
here.
there it is, about the personal experience that David had with with some cancer, and talk a little bit about how we obviously everybody knows that cancer is an important component of what we should be talking about every single day.
Right.
But tell me, what was like the moving moment for you, specifically as it relates to that? But then, what was the best moment for you at FDIC? Like, what stood out to you?
Um, well, actually, I'll have to say that was definitely a powerful moment, but what came out of that was incredible. You guys gave the award to Bill Guston for Instructor of the Year. He sent Mike and I an email on Wednesday after the show was over Saturday and basically expressed the same feelings you just expressed about that piece and said, "Hey, just wanted you two guys to know while you were talking, I was feeling a couple spots on my face exactly where you pointed, and my daughter was with me, and I had her look at them, and she said, 'You got to get those checked.'" And he went Thursday, and they biopsied him, and they were all squamous cell carcinoma, and so he's got to go get them removed. And here's a guy who's been in the fire service 50 years, who knows everything, and he was moved enough because he heard it from a peer to actually go get checked. And so that is the biggest moment of my FDIC is
That's
Bill
awesome.
Guston
And
got diagnosed and is getting taken care of.
yeah, also over at Lucas Oil Stadium, you guys set up a kind of a makeshift med center for people
Yeah.
to any attendee could walk over there for free. Were getting quick checks done. So thank you guys for investing your time and energy into that cause. As an attendee, we really appreciate it. And it's the bigger picture, right? So those 1 or 2 people, they're going to go back and tell 10 more, and they're going to go tell
Yep.
10 more.
And so it's back to the instructor responsibility. It's like we could have had 100 doctors come up there and tell you how you needed to be checked. But when we hear it from our own people, it just drives it home. And I think it's more impactful than hearing any professional in any other thing. So we're watched. So the way we take our gear off at a fire, the way we decon ourselves, that's making a difference as much as any speech will.
Yeah, absolutely. And, hopefully everybody that's on this call will know that, building that conversation into your discussions on a daily basis or in your, as your, even a single slide in every program you teach, like what a powerful, message that we can continue to pass on and share. I see you got a couple books behind you, but one of the things is you guys launched a couple new books at FDIC. Um, and if you had to pick one or two that are pretty new for fire engineering books that would be really beneficial to the instructor family, what would you say?
Definitely Andy Frederick's book for sure, because it's just, the collection of his work that just keeps coming up in almost every conference you go to. There's references to it. So it was a place where we could officially put the work Andy did with fire engineering and the work that he did with fire nuggets in one place that was legit, and you could get it at an affordable price. And I think we're in the fourth printing already. So we sold out. We almost sold out before the show. Actually would have if we didn't stop it, because we wanted to have books for the show. So I think that one's huge. And I think the other one that is just, I won't say surprising, but it's done better initially than I thought it would, and has resonated, is the Incident Command book, Calming the Chaos, with Castros and Brian Brush. That one's already in a second printing, and that thing is huge, but it meets standards. It has stories, so it's kind of the perfect model of the kind of books we want to put out. And I had this conversation with Bobby before he passed away, as he was pushing towards more textbook style publications. And somebody had written one, and it had some anecdotal stories in it, and he wanted to cut them out. He just wanted it to be a textbook. And Bobby was about 10 years older than me. And so it's funny how you look at like the generational differences and what like social media platforms you use and all. It's true of anything. He was used to no nonsense, just textbook, say what you got to say and be done with it. But I like the stories that were in the book, and I recommended that he keep them. And this was a different book. But I said, I think this generation needs the stories because they don't have the context for the lesson. And so what Castros and Brush did was exactly that. They got a very comprehensive textbook type deal for command that meets all of the national standards. But then there's stories that hammer home the points, that are actual. They're not fiction. They're actual fireground stories that they asked people to tell and inserted them in the right place in the chapters. So those are a couple. And I think we had 14 books. They're all great. The water thievery book is awesome. And then we had a book similar to Andy's, which was Brenacini's works, which was his complete works, with a special introduction by Mrs. Smith, by the way.
Very cool.
We were able to track her down.
I think that's fantastic. Well, I don't want to dominate the conversation. The whole purpose of Happy Hour is for you guys to, number one, turn your cameras on, show us that, if you're there. But if you have any questions, this is a great time to, ask away, ask about, one of the things I think that we as an organization could be doing better is helping to develop that next generation of instructors for FDIC. A lot of these guys are teaching there at FDIC that I see their names right now, but some of them perhaps not. And, maybe if they don't have any questions, but, how do they prepare themselves to be ready to teach at FDIC? What are those steps? What does that look like?
Um, well, obviously, you have to put in a proposal, but in the proposal, we're looking for a few things. One is that you've actually taught the class before. It's not something new, unless you're John Norman or somebody of that caliber, and you put, I developed this class specifically for FDIC, never taught it anywhere before. That's kind of like always a red flag for me, unless it's somebody that's super, super well established, because we want you to have taught that class before and vetted it. I think one of the common mistakes made is, since we only have hour 45 and 4 hour workshops, 4 hour hands-on and 8 hour hands-on, a lot of proposals come in that are somebody's 16-hour class that they're trying to cram into 4 hours. And you really need to build something that is a part of your existing curriculum, but knowing you're going to have 55 students in a hot class, and you're only going to have 4 or 8 hours, or you're only going to have an hour 45 to teach it versus an 8 hour day. And that's some of the feedback we get from some of the evals, is when an instructor tries to do that, they're always caught. And somebody will say, they tried to get through 300 slides in an hour and 45 minutes and it seemed rushed. So you have to think about your delivery. So yes, we want you to be familiar and you've delivered the class, X number of times, whether it's at least in your department or in your area, but preferably even, further than that, so that we know it's kind of been modified over time to work the kinks out. And then you have to take that and make it fit, the 4 hour or the hour 45 format. So, and then the other thing is to sort of establish yourself with that topic by writing articles, being on podcasts, any type of contribution you can make to any of our brands to provide content that ups your attractability to our board, and and your score in the system. And there's no magic like, 1, 2, 3, you get this many points and you're automatically picked. It's still very subjective, but there are some objective criteria that we use to even get you to the subjective point. And you're looking at 1,000. I think we had 1,009 proposals last year for 300 spots. So there's a lot of really good people that don't end up in the final selection. And that's tough. That's always tough. But it doesn't mean you're not a good instructor. If you don't get selected, it just means that we either had too many proposals for that one topic, or there may have been somebody else who has done more contributing articles, books, webcast, podcast over the particular year than you have. So hard work pays off. Doing a lot of work and getting your stuff out there. Obviously, there's a perception out there that it's changed from the old industry experts to just the Facebook and Instagram guys that post and are popular. And it actually helps us if somebody has a social media presence, because we can go investigate. But just because you're popular doesn't mean that you're going to get a class. I mean, we want you to be familiar and be somewhat of an expert in that subject. And then a lot of those people, that's generational too, because when you grow up with Brunacini and John Norman and those guys, and they step away, nobody ever replaces them. So nobody's ever good enough to come in. But I think the Brian Brushes and Nicholas Papa, those guys, that's the new generation of folks that are going to be, those iconic leaders.
Well, Seth put on here that, if you had to give one word of advice on to a new instructor at FDIC, what would that be? And I think the timeliness is kind of cool because Jesse Marcotte, who is on our board, is on this, and he was a first-time instructor this year at FDIC. So, what would you say? And then Jesse, maybe you can follow up and answer like what, as the first-time instructor there, what would you, share?
So new as in you've been selected and this is your first time teaching?
First-time teaching.
Yeah, okay. Um, preparation, preparation, preparation. Practice, practice, have a backup to your backup, so that you've rehearsed. I think that's probably the biggest mistake is like you work on your presentation, but you don't actually like rehearse it, even though maybe you've taught it in a different little format or whatever. Is go through it, make sure your timing is good, make sure you leave time for questions, and don't try to cover too much in one setting. That's the biggest thing is like you got to realize the audience is there to pick up nuggets of information and take back. They're really not there to get certified in something. And so there's a big difference. It's a conference, it's an instructors conference. So people like to pop in. They don't want to be anywhere for a very long period of time. So that hour 45 is actually a good format, but you gotta have, 3 or 4 main points, make your points, make sure that you're engaging with the audience. Don't just get up there and talk. Get in early, check your equipment out, make sure it's working. Because even as much money as we pay for all of that AV equipment, things do go wrong. And, all the way back to basic instructor 101 is like have a freaking printed copy of your slides in a notebook so that if all else fails, you can at least, flip through. And I was always one, I never taught to the PowerPoint. That was just my guide to keep me on track. So it's like you're really not learning from the slide so much unless I show a video or something. But it keeps me on track and it's my main thought points. It's my bullets to keep me in the conversation. So that's the thing. People like to be engaged. They like you to ask them questions and they see right through you if you hadn't practiced and you're stumbling around or you made a million changes the night before because you were worried about
Yeah.
I think I need to cover this or I need to cover that. And I will say Sam Hiddle is the only one that can successfully get through 300 slides in an hour and 45 minutes. Other than that, everybody else is a novice.
So Jesse, would you agree with that advice? Was that good advice for a first-time instructor?
I think that's incredible advice. I'd also say as somebody who's lucky enough to be a first time instructor this year, that it was well worth the wait. So over the last several years, I've probably submitted 10 plus presentations, and I think the neat thing on the end of the instructor or myself is that it forces you to really zero in on your message and what you're trying to convey in the event that you are fortunate enough to be picked. So I thought it was a great experience, and I can definitely relate to the backup to the backup to the backup, because once you are selected, that's not an hour and 45 minutes that I want to waste.
Yeah.
Yeah, very fair. Well, and Brent kind of made a comment that, just I guess a comment of something to take back for you, David, would be looking for better ways to deliver curriculum collegiately as potential courses and offerings. So, maybe fire engineering, FDIC could explore that in the future. And then also Jesse wanted to talk a little bit about the drill yard. And for those of you who were not there, they established this fantastic hands-on training unit in Lucas Oil Stadium, right in the middle. Central Park is what they created, with a great opportunity for you to go and hang out, listen to some TED Talks, but also work with some digital training and other training aids to get a little bit of a hands-on experience. So how do you see that growing? Was that a success?
Yeah, I think so. I'm still going through the evals on a lot of that. So the concept there was to create a space that exhibitors could use to train on their products. Um, and when the exhibitors, if the exhibitors were not using their product or there was time allotted, we would fill in with regular training classes, and in some cases even partner with exhibitors for our instructors to use their equipment in the class. So it's, you guys know we're very strict about keeping the exhibitors out of the education side of the conference. So we don't want a sales pitch in a classroom. And I personally know a dozen or folks with companies that we could approve to teach, and they would put on a phenomenal class and it would not be a sales pitch. But once you open that door, then it's open, and how can you deny one and allow another one? It's not fair to the entire cadre. So I recognize that there is value in the exhibitor-led education because some of them are the absolute product experts. And it was really interesting because we had several groups come in there that were exhibitors, and each of them told me, yeah, when we did our class, we did our best not to make it a sales pitch. And I was like, but it's okay. That's what it's for. But they didn't feel comfortable making it a sales pitch because now they had the trainer hat on. And so I thought that was awesome because you guys know the best products sell themselves.
Yeah.
You just want to know how to use it and be educated on it. And so I think we're going to definitely expand that area. It'll be bigger next year. We're doing some surveys with the exhibitors. So there'll still be opportunity for groups. I know you guys taught 1403 class there with the burn building. And these are not hot classes like you get on a bus and go for 8 hours. And these are hands-on experiences. So you might be able to force a door, you might be able to put on gear and an air pack and search the building, but it's not going to be a 4 or an 8 hour class. It's going to be an hour long class. So it's an engaging experience to allow you to use some equipment and some of those facilities. So some of the things we're looking at is the addition of a teaching shed, which all of us here knows what that is. So it'll be like a small stage with a cover, with some bleachers, possibly like a plexiglass guard where you could actually put a car behind it and cut up a car, and it still be safe. The TED Talks will probably move into that little area. So there'll be like some stadium seating in the metal stadium seating, and then just all kinds of demos and things over there. We're going to add a 3 or 4 story tower. I actually got a picture of what we're talking about adding there is something like this right here. So there'll be a 3 or 4 story tower in there that you can do hose advancement, you can do rope rescue, you can do bailouts. And so we're just trying to put a lot of stuff in there that's useful to instructors and to exhibitors, and an opportunity for a lot of partnerships. So I definitely see it growing, and working on a highly technical, super secret way to actually flow water inside there that we think is going to be possible. The
Wow.
concept is there, the partnerships are there, but it's in the early stage of development. So that may be a possibility too, even right down to the electric fire pump to pump it.
Wow.
You know, we can't actually run an apparatus in there, but we can run, if we have something with an electric pump on it, we can run it. So that will expand the rescue zone with the vehicles. Hopefully we'll have some more hybrid and electric vehicles in that area. And I think it's good to have that throughout the week. Not everybody can make it to HOT or to the HOT workshops. So the idea is to kind of keep the education going all week long, even if it's in small little doses. So
Yeah, a fully immersive experience for sure. And the students that our guys had, even for those short little 30-minute time periods, most of them, were first-time attendees at FDIC, and um, so it's for us, it's kind of cool not to see a whole different kind of student as a sponge for those moments.
and it's a
Um, but
good recruiting ground for them to come to pre-con stuff or to come to one of your classes you offer in their area. It's getting the word out and good exposure to organizations and to brands as well. So
Well, kind of going back to, we had a couple of questions about two that are about instructional style, and then one that kind of goes back to getting more involved with fire engineering. But so can you just quickly touch on, Phil, and Phil's probably he's one of the most dynamic, fun, exciting speakers. Love to hear him talk, and his room is always packed. But how often do you stick to the slide deck versus do you let the conversation drive where the conversation goes? Did I say that right, Phil? Is that kind of where you were going with that?
yeah, obviously it depends on what I'm doing. So if it's a curriculum based, you're teaching a curriculum based class that they're going to have to take a test on, then obviously there's a lot more restriction. If I'm just teaching, um, let's say for instance, like, so I've been asked to go teach a leadership class somewhere for 2 to 4 hours. Definitely, if it's my stuff, I let the um, attendees drive it all. I am not afraid to have 40 slides and only get through 5 of them because of the conversations and the engagement. Actually, that's the most fun
Yeah.
because if you end up getting through all of your slides, then that means people are just sitting there listening. But if you get them engaged and they start asking questions, it almost turns into a roundtable almost where, just one question leads to another and you just kind of walk around the room and have a conversation. And, you're talking about the whole FDIC experience. Even back to my early days of attending classes at the Georgia Fire Academy, which was just this impressive, massive training ground that had, police, fire, corrections, natural resource. I mean, everything is in this one huge, I guess it's like 600-acre complex. Um, the magic really happens in the networking. It's not so much the class, it's the networking and hearing what other departments do. That's where you really learn a lot. And it's dinner, it's FDIC, it's at the bar after hours, it's dinner. So the classes are really just sort of a connecting point that start conversations that go on, hopefully long after the class. So yeah, I'm 100% free baller on not letting my slides dictate. But again, there are some curriculums where you have to get through certain objectives in order for them to pass a test or whatever, and then that's a different set. And then usually even in those, if I have a real engaged class, then I'll just stay extra. I'll say, all right, we got through all the stuff we got to. Now, what do y'all want to know?
Yeah, well, and that might answer the next question. Michael, had a question about, and you were talking about you're getting ready to go teach a leadership class. What advice would you give an instructor who's trying to kind of inspire and bring in or mentor that next generation of instructors? And being present, I'll let you certainly answer this, but for me, when I go and have an instructor who teaches and then is packing up their bag 5 minutes before the end while they're still talking, it's like that old college professor, like they're just hurrying up to get out. Like they
Yeah.
came, they did it. For you to stay after and to be engaged with the student, to me, that's the most inspiring part and would make me want to pursue that as well.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to relationships. Relationships make everything happen. So if you can't connect um, with them and you're just there to teach and get out of town or whatever, then, that's delivering the class is only one piece of the puzzle. And you need to plan on either being there early and having some social time with the crew that brought you there, or being there after hours and going to dinner and letting that conversation continue, because you're going to learn, but you're also going to build relationships that are going to open doors and possibilities for other things. And your lessons stick more when you do that, because there's the trust factor. And once you have the relationship with the group or certain individuals, then you can kind of not have to over communicate, and they're going to fill in the blanks where you may leave something out. And yeah, it's same as being a boss or a chief. If you have that good relationship and trust, you don't have to say everything verbatim. They'll fill in the blanks for you. And when you mess up, they'll even kind of correct it in their mind for you, and you don't get the blame for it. So they're always looking
And
out
I,
for you.
I think it's Anthony Avillo who plays he's a rocker. He loves some good rock music. So he'll play some crazy rock music as you're coming
Yeah.
into the room. But when you first like turn the corner to go in, you're like, where am I going? What am I
Yeah.
doing? And then all of a sudden you're like, this is the most inviting environment. Like, it was encouraging other people to talk to each other versus sitting in your one chair and not looking left or right, like your head's down because you don't want to make eye contact. So I thought that was kind of an interesting approach, an instructional approach.
Psychology is so important in teaching. And um, I can't remember what airline it was, but you know how like when you get on a plane to go somewhere, it's like even though you're crammed in with three other people, nobody really talks. There may be that one or two people that say, "Hey, how you doing?" Whatever, and you might kind of hit it off and start talking. But for the most part, everybody's like blinders on.
Yeah.
Just nobody talks. You just sit down and you're like, "Oh God, I'm on a plane again." But I can't remember if it was Spirit or one of those airlines, maybe Southwest. They played music. You got on board, and then the music started, and everybody on the plane's talking to each other.
Yeah, it's
Just
fantastic.
that one little move triggers something in your brain to relax you a little bit and make you want to talk. And it wasn't just elevator music; it was actually like something you'd recognize. It may not have been the original artist, but it was something like that you'd recognize. And so little things like that are important. Bobby and I used to talk about edutainment is what we called it, and it's kind of like the keynote. The keynote in the main program is edutainment.
Yeah.
It's a message, but you can't get too deep because you only got 20 minutes. It has to be somewhat entertaining. It doesn't need to be a comedy act, for 20 minutes, but you have to do something to not just be talking at people. Even though nobody's really talking back to you, you want to be having a conversation with the audience, and you got to stimulate them not to fall asleep, so you throw little things in here and there to kind of break it up. And one of the things I used to do all the time, especially with like a 2 hour class or whatever, sometimes I would stop about halfway if it was not long enough to have a break, but you're getting into that 2 hour mark or like an hour 45. Sometimes about halfway, I would just be like, all right, everybody stand up. Everybody'd stand up, and I'd be like, man, it's awesome to be in charge. And then everybody'd kind of laugh, and I'd say, all right, you can sit down. And that would just totally break it up, because somebody's there with 1,000 yard stare. They just ate lunch and they're just like about to die, and you're giving them permission to move. It's like, get up, stretch for a second. But I just do it. I'd be like, all right, everybody stand up, like we're about to do something, knowing I was going right back to my talk. And then I'd be like, all right, man, it's awesome to be in charge of a room.
I
People will
love
do
it.
whatever you say.
Well, we're running late on time here, but I do want to get to Christopher Zach's question, because he specifically has some questions about fire engineering. And the reason I think this is important is because as a board of directors, ISFSI has often talked about like, what can we do better organizationally to connect the dots and to help get those authors and writers and contributors to you guys. So he really wants to know a little bit about the writing process, like, you know, you particularly, like, what is your jam? What is your routine for when you're writing? Do you go off to a special location? Do you wake up in the middle of the night up with a sticky note and jot an idea down? And, you know, do you use, what's your routine, David? Tell us.
I would love to be able to tell you how disciplined I am and how I follow a specific process every day, like these folks that crank out these novels and all that. But I've never been able to follow any kind of structured routine. And so, yes, I wake up in the middle of the night and I think of something, and I've got this feature on my phone called Notes. And it might just be a sentence. And I'll be like, oh, that's good. And I'll get up and I'll type it into my phone. And I've probably got, I don't know, there's thousands of sentences in here that are just sentences. And then some of them are titles. And so I try to stay, I'm actually behind right now, but I try to stay about 3 or 4 months ahead so that I don't get under pressure and get that writer's block pressure. So, but kind of when I get on a roll with something, I may get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and come down here and bang out 2 editorials. And then I'll have time to go back and look at them and structure them. And they're like 900, 1,000 words at the most. But no, I don't have any special system or I guess special location. I typically will write them right here where I'm sitting. But I have written a few on the road, like in a hotel room or whatever. I wrote quite a few on the road. I started to actually put that in the editorial because I've seen that in some books. You know, it'd be like, put the date and where you're at. So it'd be like, March 14th, Key West, Florida, and then have your editorial. I thought that would kind of be neat, but most of them are Bogart, Georgia, near Athens. So I figured that'd get old if I was just putting that every time.
Well,
So yeah,
I do to better prepare our members to be contributors. What is there something that we can be doing that would improve that?
no, just jump in. I think a lot of people have the misconception that when you turn in an article, it has to look like it looks in the magazine, and they got to insert the pictures, and some people get worried, I don't know how to wrap it around. And like, we actually don't want that because our people have to do it. We just want what's in your head. Until probably 7 or 8 years ago, Bill Guston turned his articles in on a legal pad. So
not many people could get away with that.
No. And, we have to protect our seniors. So Diane would type it up and send it back to him and all, but he actually has a computer and does well with it now. But the biggest thing is, it's like everybody says for anything, it's like, just do it. Like write your thoughts down and send it to us. And I've got Mike Champo now, who's part-time with us. He's kind of like, I call him the fixer. So somebody will send me something and it's a total train wreck as an article, but there's some really good information in there. I'm like, I like what this guy's talking about, but dude, he's like, there's no flow. He's all over the place. She didn't cover half what needed to be covered, or they tried to cover way too much. So I'll send it to Champ, who's been writing forever. And I'll say, hey, will you get with this person and let's, talk to them. After they do that a couple times, they kind of learn how to make something flow. And that's the biggest thing with an article. An article's not a book. So if you're going to write an article on search, you can't cover search from soup to nuts. You can only cover like one component of, of search, or either you're going to do a very cursory overview. So keep it simple. Keep it simple. Talk tactics, talk using tools. We get 50 leadership articles to every one tactic article we get. And a lot of that's because the further along you get in your career, the more comfortable you are with writing, or if you're a chief officer, you may be used to writing. And what do you know at that point? Your day is full of leadership stuff. So um, it's not that we don't want leadership stuff, but we get so much of it that um, we're really looking for incident reports. Those are like my favorite articles of all. Like you had an incident happen in your area, and you write it up, lessons learned, pictures from the incident, what you did good, what you would do different. And you can go in as depth, like you can go into code issues, you can go into tactics, whatever you want to go in, but the incident reports are one of my favorite. And we do actually have a guide for those. So if somebody wants to do one of those, they can email us and we can shoot the guide out for there that kind of tells you the structure to put those in. But don't be afraid to send us. People send me stuff all the time. They'll start out with 2 or 3 paragraphs and say, "Hey, is this interesting?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, it needs to be, a little bit longer than that." But content's changing too. So we need 3 to 5 minute videos. If you're not comfortable writing, give us a video, give us a training video we can use on the web. Give us I think they call them shorts. Sam Hiddle sends us some stuff quite often that we use, but we're looking for tons of that stuff. It could be a tactical tip. Maybe you're not actually demonstrating whatever it is. Of course, we like that, but maybe you're just giving a tactical tip about how to check out your apparatus, or it could be a tip on preparing for a class. Like here's 3 important things to do before your students arrive. Make
Nice.
sure your batteries are charged in your clicker. Make sure your videos play. And what's one of the biggest fails of going somewhere and teaching is you take your class on a thumb drive and you plug it in and none of your videos play because they're not actually embedded into the thing. They play perfect on your computer because it knows where to go find them. And that's that's a skill. You got to know how to do that. I usually have to call somebody and say, how do I embed this? But that's a skill. So we need all of that stuff. So
Well, that's
you
that's
can just
important
send it to us.
information and something that I think we can share, more globally as well, to our membership. And we have a pretty robust formal mentorship program. And so, I think that would be another great place for us to also kind of help people maybe write that first paragraph to get those creative juices flowing, that
Yeah.
perhaps can be nationally published. So
And from an organizational standpoint, like we can collaborate on those videos. Like they can be ISFSI videos on fire engineering that are, shared on the platforms. They don't have to be exclusive to us to where you can't use them. you
Well,
know?
it's funny that you should be mentioning that because, we were reviewing Dr. Lori's strategic initiative, and specifically how can ISFSI have a stronger role in that CRR movement that we're seeing. And so one of the things we talked about doing is using some of our classes to do short training videos. So I think that would be, I'm actually talking to Jesse because he's heading that up. So he's shaking his head. I figured he was listening.
Yeah. And a lot of people already have them. They just may post them on their own social media or whatever. But yeah, if any of your instructors that have anything, that they want to share, just shoot it to us and we'll
Perfect.
see where it fits. And we have, Firefighter Nation is rebranding, June 17th. So Firefighter Nation's been like a little community, a lot of news, and it's going totally health, wellness, lifestyle, and leadership. And so we only dedicate 1 month a year in fire engineering to health and wellness. There's a few articles sprinkled here and there, but as far as an editorial calendar, it's December. And so this is going to be 24/7 health, wellness, lifestyle, leadership. So we need a ton of content over there for that. And that's everything: mental health, physical health, workouts, diet, cooking shows. We have financial planning stuff. And then we want to have some fun stuff on there too. So like if you're at one of your training events or whatever, and you just grab somebody for a conversation and film it on the cell phone, I mean, that's good stuff. It's like, it's news, but it's not anything that would make the 5 o'clock news, but it's news to us.
Perfect. Well, we really appreciate you being here. For those of you who don't know, David is an avid Georgia Bulldog, so he's wearing his Georgia red right now. I wore my Auburn orange with my SEC champions basketball shirt just for you today.
Outstanding.
War Eagle, my
I'm
friend.
not a hater, but I am a dog at heart. My daughter actually graduates tomorrow.
Well, congratulations. Thank you guys for being on. Membership is obviously the cornerstone to this organization, and it's why we do what we do. So thanks for participating. I hope you took away a couple key points today. And if you're looking in the chat feature, David shared his email with you. So reach out to him or any of the leadership at ISFSI if you want to get more involved with getting published with fire engineering. We appreciate you, David.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. And it's good to see everybody.
Yes, indeed.
Good to see you, Phil, Seth. And I got the message, 1,000 acres at GPSDC.
It's a big spot. We were just there 2 weeks ago. We did our water mapping grant there. It's fantastic.
I haven't been there recently, but man, I spent a ton of hours there in my younger days. I was actually teaching for them before they were there. They were in Marietta at first. So.
Nice.
Much smaller facility in Marietta.
All right, gang. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye. Have a good afternoon.